Emerging as the guardian of the city's plumbing system, Tucson, Arizona is lucky to have him. It's Paul Sammarano, and it's the Imperial Plumbing Podcast. Here we go. And welcome to the Imperial Plumbing Podcast, where Imperial Plumbing's very own founder and CEO, Paul Sammarano, is going to be talking about water heaters. But first, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Nick. That type of introduction, I feel like Batman.
You're here to save the day, and you do it on a daily basis. So a superhero is not too far from your current status. But let's transition into water heaters, which is the subject of today's Imperial Plumbing Podcast. Let's start by talking about the different types of water heaters. And for those of you at home listening, we're going to be talking about tank-style water heaters, tankless water heaters, and touch on both gas and electric. Paul, talk about the traditional tank-style water heater.
Well, sure thing. So out here in Tucson in the summer, you almost don't even think about water heaters until you need it, like right now when it's pretty cold this time of year. And most houses have a tank-type water heater. Tankless is a fairly new technology in the 90s and on up. So majority of people have tank-style water heaters. As far as gas or electric, you're kind of restricted to what the utilities bring you. If you have gas, you have the option of going electric or gas. If you have no gas service, then you are basically stuck on electric. And they all have their pros and cons. It really depends on your usage.
Does that mean that some houses are out of a gas-style water heater just because they don't have gas running into their home?
That's right. There's some things like out in the boonies, they'll run like a propane. So that is kind of considered a gas water heater. It's just not natural gas. But you have to require a storage tank on the outside to be feeding you. And that's usually for your water heater, your heater, and your range. Sometimes your dryer will all be run off of those.
So is it safe to say that most homes in Tucson run on electric water heaters, or is it about 50-50?
I'd say about 60-40 to a lot of people are on gas, but electric is really starting to get more popular. I'm noticing a trend with solar and electric. You know, if you're having solar panels on your roof, then that offsets the cost of your electric water heater.
Before we move into tankless water heaters, what would cost more on a utility bill, a gas-powered water heater or an electric-powered water heater?
So it's all going to come down, again, to usage. You know, if you have a teenager taking a really, really long shower, no matter if you have gas or electric, it's going to be a high bill. And it also depends how efficient your water heater is as far as if it's newer or if it's full of sediment, and its recovery rate, how fast it can recover.
Very interesting stuff. And moving on to the modern marvel in water heaters, which is this fly on the wall type thing. But instead of a fly on the wall, it's the water heater on the wall. These mounted tankless water heater that oftentimes you'll see them in a garage or in a utility room. They're just there on the wall, and sometimes you even see them outside. Paul, talk to me a little bit about your personal experience in watching the popularity of tankless water heaters really take hold from the time you started until now. How has this technology evolved?
Sure. Well, it's certainly gotten more interesting as more manufacturers are jumping on the bandwagon. The tankless water heaters kind of suffer from misinformation. A lot of people perceive of them as instant water heaters. And to a certain extent, that's true. The moment you turn on a faucet, the heater kicks on and starts heating the water. But that doesn't mean it's going to come out of your faucet instantly. It's just going to start heating the water as it's moving through the heater. So there's that misconception. But the great thing about them is they're way more efficient. They're only turned on when you need them. And they essentially give you endless hot water, I'd say was a better term for it. As long as you have that faucet running hot water will come out of that faucet.
Yeah, and the amount of time it takes for a tankless water heater to feed you that hot water compared to a tank style water heater, is it quicker on the tankless side, or is it quicker on the tank side that has an entire storage tank full of hot water ready to go?
So it's not going to matter what type of water heater you have on the end of the line. It could be Old Faithful from Yellowstone. For all it matters, what matters is the length of pipe. Let's just say 50 feet of cold water in the hot pipe. It's going to all have to be pushed through as cold water for the hot water to arrive. For that, we have recirculation pumps, which we would always they're compatible with the tankless water system, and we'd always make sure you know your options before making any type of decisions on those.
Touch a little bit more on the tankless style. You mentioned something very interesting that more companies were adopting to the tankless water heater. When you were starting out, was it just a few manufacturers that were making them, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, they've gotten a lot more efficient nowadays. They figured out how to condense them. So that means it's just almost 100% efficient. More manufacturers have jumped on the bandwagon. There's more rebates out there on the federal side that are definitely helping with adoption for them. The other thing that's really seemed to be helping them is tankless water heaters are finally becoming more mainstream because plumbers are being educated on them. Before, they were seen as a novelty product.
What do you mean as a novelty product? Does that just mean that they were very new and, whenever something's new on the market, it kind of spooks some of the old school guys, and, some of these plumbers out there are pretty old school, right?
Exactly. It's kind of scary to see a motherboard next to your plumbing if you don't know what's going on. But they use the latest technology, but extremely efficient, smart. You can program them. Some run off of your smartphone, so you can turn them off when you're on vacation, or increase it as the temperature decreases. Some of them are even hooked up to your utility company, and they can, during power spikes, they can help control how much is being consumed.
Paul, I have two more questions about tankless water heaters. The first one is, does it matter where it is installed, whether it's outside, whether it's in your garage, whether it's in your living room? Does that really make a difference?
I'd say it does, because some of the tankless water heaters on the gas side, they actually are so efficient that the venting condensates, which means it has vapor, and it all kind of pulls out, so it needs somewhere to drain. So if you have it smack in the middle of the house, you have to figure out a way to get that condensation out. Definitely want to place it somewhere strategic where you can make sure you drain it. And you also want to have access to it so you can service it. As far as electric, you of course have to run the proper electricity to it, make sure it's wired properly. So those are all considerations of where they're placed. Outside, they do require a kit to protect it from the elements. You don't want the sun beating down on it. Especially the tankless gas water heaters, they suck in air, and there's little filters so it don't suck up like a bug or dust or anything like that.
While Tucson is in the desert, it is known to have a couple monsoon seasons. If rain gets into one of these electric tankless water heaters, is that going to be a problem?
Well, that's the kits that they sell for the outside prevent water from touching the electronics. So if they're rated for outside, it'll be perfectly fine.
My last question about these tankless water heaters is, are they hard to control? Are they hard to maintain? Are they different to turn on and turn off? The beautiful thing about these tanked water heaters is you just install it and you're good to go, right? Is there something special about these tankless water heaters that you got to play around with?
Well, as far as programming, no. You pretty much set it, forget it. But it's very important maintenance is done to any water heater. That's kind of the double-edged sword, right? They work in the corner silently. You forget about it until it doesn't work. But it is important that you maintain them.
hold that thought, Paul, because we're going to get into maintenance a little later on. First, I just want to talk about the elephant in the room here. Tucson homeowners are listening to this and getting great information about water heaters, but let's get to the bottom line here. What does it cost? In this day and age, it's all about minimizing expenses for homeowners, but they still need their hot water. So let's break it down, Paul. The difference in costs between a tanked water heater and a tankless water heater.
That's a great question, and I wish I had an easy answer, but it really depends on every situation. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you have a tankless already, it's going to cost a lot less to swap it out with another one. If you're going from tank to tankless, it does require a bit of retrofit. Of course, if you're going from an electric tank to an electric tankless, it does require thicker wiring, more amperage. So there is the cost you got to factor in of electrician. But I think really the answer to that would be your use case. Let's just say you have a larger family and the tank water heater just can't keep up with your teenagers, or if you draw a bath, you're using all your hot water, and then if someone wants to shower afterwards, they're out of luck. They have to wait for it to recover. With the tankless, you won't have that issue. So there's considerations like that.
It's a really good point that you brought up, Paul, and kind of leads me to the next thing that I wanted to ask you is, well, a water heater is not a one-size-fits-all for a Tucson homeowner. You've got different sizes of those tanked water heaters, and in fact, even the tankless come in different sizes. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So could you break it down? Different sized water heater for a different sized household, and can you get into the specifics of how they measure the size of water heaters? If you go to Paul Samorano at Imperial Plumbing and say, "Hi, could I get the small size?" We're not going to laugh at you. However, we're going to know that you probably didn't listen to the Imperial Plumbing podcast.
Right. So it again depends on your usage. So as far as a storage or a traditional tank water heater, we look at the storage space. So they come in usually about 30, 40, and 50 gallon sizes. On the electric side, they go in smaller to 10 to 20. And we see your usage as far as they figured out on the rating about the average shower, washing the dishes, what that be. So they're rated for family size, for back-to-back shower recovery rate. Because a tank water heater, for instance, it has 50 gallons of hot water. Someone takes a shower, cold water is entering the tank. And now it has to keep up, with heating up that new water that came in and maintain the already hot water. And that's going to basically be a rating factor. Now, on the tankless, you mentioned sizing. They rate those by gallons per minute. So depending what unit you have, that's going to be the factor, gallons per minute. So if you have like a shower head that is shooting all types of water, and plus a tub running, it might not keep up and we have to size up. If you have regular shower heads, then we can calculate what size would fit for you. So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
It's very interesting thinking of a tanked water heater, kind of like a tea kettle, that you boil some water in a kettle, and perhaps your cup of tea doesn't take up the entirety of the hot water that was in that kettle, but maybe I'll leave it on a low temperature because heck, I might want a second cup later. Is that kind of how that tanked water heater works?
I wish it was that simple, but actually no. As soon as you turn on the faucet, and let's say you use 10 gallons of hot water, 10 gallons of cold water comes in, and the tank has to maintain that heat. So it basically fires on and tries to heat up all the water to get back to the temperature you set it to. That would be a better analogy, but I think the teapot analogy is pretty good as far as you have all this water, some's missing, but think of it as you're pouring another pot of cold water or a cup of cold water to replace the one you just used.
And if I'm having an old-fashioned British tea party over at the house and I've got 12 mates over, probably want to bigger kettle, which means I might want a bigger hot water heater if I've got a family of 5. Am I onto something here, Paul?
I think you are, Nick. That's exactly the problem with the family. And that's why you essentially have to size it correctly.
Well, let's role play then a little bit here. Let's say I am a homeowner who miraculously chose Imperial Plumbing out of all the companies in Tucson. It's a good choice, huh, Paul?
I would say so.
Anyways, I'm looking to replace my water heater. And you know what, Paul? I have no idea what I need. This unit was here when I bought the house, and it looks like it's time for a new one. So how are you and the great team at Imperial Plumbing going to help me out, Paul?
Sure. So we like to go out in person, because seeing it in just a photo, well, maybe your old unit wasn't good enough for you. So we like to go out in person. We see the size. Another thing you have to take into consideration is that back in, I believe it was 2015, the EPA passed a new standard that water heaters have to be more efficient. And with tank water heaters, the only way you can make it more efficient is you add more insulation. So as a result, some of the newer tanks got fatter. So if your water heater was in a tight spot to begin with, the new ones might not fit. You might have to downsize, or some other option might happen. So the first thing we do is go out there, see what your usage would be, how many people are in the house, how often, and see the size of unit you would need. And then from there, give you your options. There's so much exciting new technology in the water heater industry right now that you probably have a lot of questions, and we would definitely be able to answer them and take all your questions.
It's that personal experience that makes Imperial Plumbing such a great company to work with. Paul, forgive me if I speak bluntly, but water heaters seem to be on the low end in terms of homeowner priority when it comes to maintenance. Is that right, Paul?
Well, that's right. It's the analogy I always give people is, it's like you buying a brand new car and not changing the oil, right? In your car, you luckily have all these alarms and whistles that tell you, hey, go change your oil. But in your house, your water heater is just going to be in the corner, sometimes in a closet, sometimes an exterior closet, and you forget about it until something goes wrong, until you don't have hot water.
I've had a water heater for 5 years. It's a tank style water heater. Have not had any maintenance on it, not even once. Let's say Imperial Plumbing shows up with magical X-ray goggles and says, hey, Nick, put these on and take a look at your water heater. What am I going to see in there, Paul?
You might never want to drink the water again if you see it. What we see happen is all that calcium that you get on your faucet and stuff, well, it actually lives inside the water heater tank. It basically stores it. So what we actually see is, at about year 2, if you don't flush it, you get this oatmeal-like consistency inside your water heater tank. And
I'm sorry, Paul, did you say oatmeal?
Yes, it is like sediment that looks like oatmeal. And yeah, and it's bad in a bunch of ways. Number one is you're showering with that stuff, right? You're brushing your teeth with it. And then it ruins the efficiency of the water heater. So think of it, the water heaters now, instead of heating up just water, it's like heating up solids like oatmeal. And in some extreme cases, out here, you can actually hear the water heaters making that rumbling noise sound like there's rocks on the inside. So that's what you'll see with your X-ray vision.
Did you say rocks on the inside?
It sounds like it. It's like basically these clumps of calcium. And when the heat turns on, you hear like this rumbling, crackling, popping noise.
You're able to do something about that?
Well, we are. So we actually have some tools that actually can help flush the water heater, more than just attach a garden hose in it. Actually, we can shoot air into it. We have a tool that actually goes in there, breaks up the sediment, and allows us to flush it out. But before you get to even to that situation, Nick, if your heater is new, it's important to get on a maintenance schedule and flush it out so you don't get to that point. And that's with tank water heaters. With tankless, they have to be descaled because that same scale buildup will develop on the inside and it loses efficiency. So we attach a solution that we backflush into the system and clean it out and descale it to make sure it's running at peak efficiency.
Those homeowners that did follow a routine water heater maintenance schedule, have they noticed a difference, Paul?
It's hard to put a gauge on that because you don't really know it's bad until it goes bad. I could tell you their heater's going to last longer. They're going to have less sediment inside of it. And that sediment can sometimes travel and clog up your faucets. So faucets that aren't running as good as they used to might be plugged up from the water heater. Another thing that you'll really notice is the water heater can keep up, has a faster recovery rate. So going back to your analogy with the tea kettle, instead of having blocks, or imagine rocks, let's just say rocks, inside of it, it's just water, so it can heat up even quicker.
What does a maintenance schedule look like for a homeowner in Tucson who wants to maximize the longevity of their water heater?
I would say it's best to do it on an annual basis because our water out here, it's hard as a rock. It's very aggressive because of the desert climate. And even if you have like a water softener system, the sodium water can be pretty hard on the tank. It's important to do the maintenance regardless if you have a system or not.
So once a year, you call up Imperial Plumbing. You say, I've got this water heater, looking to get a little maintenance done, and you'll get me on the books, and then a plumber will show up. How long is he going to be there? What's he going to need from me? And what's he going to do?
So we actually go through a whole checklist of things that we check. Of course, it's important to flush it out, get all that sediment out. But there's also other components that are actually part of the water heater that we check. I'll just go over a couple real quick. There's a thing called an anode rod that goes down the center of your water heater. It's basically this stick of a less noble metal, and it's designed to be sacrificial. You can Google the pictures. It's crazy. I wish I could show you right now what it looks like when you pull those out. But it's basically put in there to be sacrificial. So it allows itself to get eaten so your tank is fine. The problem is if no one is changing it, then what happens is it's completely gone, and then the water heater itself gets eaten up. So that's one thing we check. We also check that it's to the proper temperature. We check the temperature and pressure relief valve. It's basically like a safety blow-off valve. And going back to your teapot analogy, it's basically the part that whistles, right? It lets out the steam. If your water heater were to malfunction, this part would basically open up and allow it to let off the steam or the excess pressure. But with our horrible Arizona water, it can get stuck. And then you have all this built up pressure, all sorts of bad things can happen. So what to expect when an Imperial plumber goes out is we do a proper flush. We run through a checklist. If we see anything wrong, we will let you know.
That's Paul Sammarano, Tucson, Arizona's finest when it comes to the 101s on water heaters. And speaking of which, if you go to imperialplumbing.com under the resources section, you'll see a nice little plumbing blog. Our latest article is titled Choosing the Right Water Heater for Your Tucson Home. A ton of great information for homeowners in the market or soon to be in the market for a new water heater and are looking to make a smart purchase decision. Paul, thank you very much for taking the time today. I hope you enjoyed talking about water heaters as much as I enjoyed listening to it. Where can people book a Imperial Plumbing service?
So I like to say that we're in the 21st century and you can book with us a couple ways. You can call us at our main phone number, 520-222-7665, or you can book online on our website and with Google. And it's actually pretty cool. It lets you allow you to pick your own technician, what time we go out. It's great to have that flexibility and choice to pick when a plumber goes out to your house.
Booking.imperialplumbing.com is the direct link to the booking platform. And once again, that's 520-222-7665, Imperial Plumbing in Tucson, Arizona, 520-222-7665. Paul, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.